Hi, I'm Alicia and welcome to my channel Papercraft Secrets. Today I'm sharing a beautiful City of Love gatefold album I made with Mintay products. This was a Mintay Inspo Place Facebook Live, but I've also converted this into a YouTube tutorial. Let me take you step by step through the process of how I created this beautiful album with the gorgeous Mintay products. Step-by-step instructions are available as a free download on my website at www.papercraftsecrets.com.au. So let's get started. To begin with, we start with the Gate album base chippy. You can see here it has the gate on the front and then it has the blank pages behind it. And we're also going to be using the Mintay Creative Paint number 4, which is called Rosebud. So we're going to paint the front piece of the chippy album with the Rosebud paint. First of all, though, I'm just going to use my razor to cut through the joins in the middle of the gate. Then I'm going to sand the side of the gate with my sanding block to just remove any little nodules from the joins and just to smooth that surface down. Now I'm ready to start painting with the number 4 Rosebud Mintay chalk paint. And I'm just painting on the front of the album gate first, and then I paint on the back once it's sort of dried a little bit, and then I paint on the inside of all of the little edges in the gate. So this took me quite a bit of time to do, and getting all those little bits covered in beautiful pink paint. So once I had done that, it was time to take my City of Love 12 by 12 scrapbooking paper set, and this is a stunning collection of papers, and you won't want to cut this up, but we are going to. We're going to cut up every single piece of this beautiful paper, and we're going to turn it into a beautiful album. So the measurement for the album is 7.5 inches by 7.5 inches. So that's what we're going to cut our papers into. 7.5 inches by 7.5 inches. Now you may want to position the paper so that you have the best part of the picture on your album page. That is what I chose to do. It's up to you whether you want to do that or whether you just want to cut your paper, in one of the corners. Now we are going to need 12 of these 7.5 by 7.5 inch squares. So you're going to need to cut up every single paper in your scrapbooking paper set except for the front cover, and we will be needing a number 9 extra page so that we have all 12 pages. So here I go again, I'm cutting 7.5 inches and then I'm cutting again at 7.5 inches. And then I continue to do that with all of the papers until I have 12. And it can be difficult to choose as to which part of the paper to cut, depending on the paper that you are using. and I tried to use different sections of the same paper so that it would look a little bit different in the album. So if I use the top corner section on one sheet, on the exact same sheet, I would use another section of that page. Now with this page here, the number 6 page, I cut it equally using the top 2 3x4 pictures. I still had one 3x4 strip left. There's lots of scraps. Don't throw out the big scraps because we're going to use them in the album. Alright, so our next job is we're going to cut some little rectangles. Now we want our rectangles to measure 7.5 by 2.25 inches. We're just going to use some of our scraps, and we're going to need 8 of these rectangles, and these will be for the binding of our album. We're going to use these little rectangles to bind the pages together for our album. So just sort your scraps out into your smaller scraps and your bigger scraps so you can see which ones would be easiest to cut. Alright, so what I'm measuring here is my 7.5 by 2.25. And I'm making up 8 of these rectangles. Once you have cut your 8 rectangles at 7.5 by 2.25 inches, we're going to score at 1 1/8, and that's going to evenly fold these rectangles in half. Then you just need to fold them in half so that they're ready to go. Now, this is where we're going to use them to bind our album. Take one of your little binding rectangles that you folded in half, and we're going to glue it onto one of our pages from our album. Okay, so we're going to glue it onto the back of one of our pages. So we're going to put glue on one side of the fold, and then we stick that on. Nice and simple. Now we choose one of our pages that we've cut for our album, and we're going to glue that on. So just run some liquid glue all over that page, and then we're going to put that page down. Make sure it's all lining up neatly with all the edges. We're going to take another one of our little strips. We're going to put glue on half of the strip, and then we're going to glue that down onto one of the pages in our album. And that'll join on like that to the first page. So we're just going to repeat that process, grabbing our little binding rectangles, putting glue on half of the rectangle from the fold, and then gluing that to the back of the page. Once we have all of those little bits glued on to our pages, we can move on to our next step with assembling the album. And this is where we're just going to glue the back tab to the front tab. You can see that's the binded look that we're going to get at the side. Okay, so we're going to do that again. Put some glue on this little tab here, and then glue it to the one behind it, like that. It'll open quite easily. And then we just keep going with that process until we have all of our pages joined together. So now all of our pages are on, and I've chosen this paper for my back cover. So I'm going to go through and add my back papers to all of my album pages now. And you can choose any pages that you would like for your album. There's no rules as to which papers go in which order. It's completely up to your own artistic expression and your own personal preferences as to what you would like to put in what order. And all the pages are so beautiful. You know, there's no wrong way of doing this. I've chosen all the busy pages for my album, so the more detailed design pages. But if you wanted plainer pages, you could swap over to the other side of the papers and add some plainer pages into your album. Now for my front cover, where I've got my gates, I wanted to have this really pretty rose pattern underneath my gates so that you can see the roses through the gates. Now I did make it just a slight error that I need to fix. I need to put binding in on this side here, so I'm just going to peel that paper back a little bit and add another piece of binding in on this side for my gate opening. So I'm just going to slip that on there, and then I'll just glue that paper back in. Just glue that back together there. So now I've got a little piece of binding on either side of my album where I can use my front gates. I actually decided to change the binding that I used to the rose colored binding so that everything's matching, because I wanted it to be all the same design, so that I just changed that out for the rose paper, so that I've got 2 rose bindings on either side, and then I've got the rose paper across the middle, so it's all matching now. So that's made me feel happier. So I'm just going to cut this to fit the door, or you could cut it on your paper trimmer. And you can see how I'm going to make that into the little gate. And so I'm now going to glue the rose paper onto my gate. So just putting some glue all around the back of the gate. And I need to fill my glue up. It's really running low. And so there's my beautiful gates. I love that rose paper behind because it kind of looks like it's leading to a garden of roses. Now this is where you need your extra number 9 paper. So on one side of the number 9 is elements to cut out, and the other side is just a plain design. So we're going to need to cut our 7.5 by 7.5 out of that extra number 9 paper for the front of our album. So I'm just going to glue that in. There we go. And then I'm going to glue my gates onto the front binding flaps. And I'm just making sure that the gates are lining up really well. I don't want crooked gates. Okay, that's looking amazing. I'm going to paint the edges of my album so that they are the beautiful pink color to match the rest of the album. For the front cover of my album, I'm using a doily chipboard from the Doilies 12 by 12 sheet. I'm also using a fussy cut flower from the back of the front cover, and I'm using the vine fussy cut image from the back of the front cover of the 12 by 12. I've got some pink crinkled ribbon which I'm going to put down the bottom with a little bit of lace, and then I've got a lovely pink flower, and that's going to be the base, the front, should I say, the decorated front of my album. So in order to put this together, I had to fussy cut those little images out, and I have to paint up my chipboard doily, and so I'm going to use the number 1 white chipboard paint to paint up this doily, just to give a little bit of contrast. I could have used the pink again, but I felt the white might just be a nice little contrast. So once I had that all painted up, then I am going to glue it onto my album. And I'm only going to glue it onto one side of the album, not the other side, because I want it to be able to open easily. So I'm only putting glue on the left-hand side of the door. And then I'm going to position that in the middle, but it will only be glued to the left-hand side of the door. So then I'm just adding a little bit of recycled cardboard to the back of that large fussy cut flower image. And I'm going to glue that on top of the white doily. And then I've cut my vine in half so that I can have a little bit poking out of either side, so I've got a symmetrical sort of look happening on the front of my album. So I'm just going to glue that just underneath that floral cluster. Okay, that's looking great. And my ribbon, I've just got 2 little pink bows and 2 little strips of dangly lace. So I'm just going to pop that on down the bottom. And then I'll cover that with some pink ribbon and my flower. So that's looking really, really pretty from the front, but not so pretty from the back. So what I've decided to do is paint the back of the doily and the fussy cut images with pink chalk paint to cover everything up and make it look pretty. So what we want to do now is we want to create some little pockets for the inside of our album. So we're going to cut our scraps to measure 4 by 8 inches, and then we're going to score at 1/2 inch, 7.5 inches, and then at 1/2 inch. And that's going to give us some little flaps that we can bend over, and then we're going to glue that to some of the pages in our album. And then we'll have a little pocket where we can put some photographs or some little note cards, and we can have things sitting in pockets. So let's get ready to create those pockets first. So let's say if we wanted to have one on every second page, so that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we're going to create 5 pockets. So I've already made 1. So I'm just going to be taking my scraps and I'm going to be cutting at 8 inches and 4 inches. So that's already 4 inches. So I've just cut that at 8 inches. Now I'm going to score at 1/2 inch, 7.5 inches, and 3.5 inches. And you just continue to do that to each of your pockets. 1/2 inch, 7.5 inches, 3.5 inches. So you've got a 1/2 inch border all the way around the edge. We then need to cut off these little corners. I did them as a square at first, but later I come back and I realized that it's better to cut them into a triangle. because it just helps with the folding. It makes it just that little bit easier. It's just a bit of trial and error when making these pockets. So then you just need to go through and fold down on all of the score lines. And this is where I realized that probably triangular corners is a neater option. So I just went through and trimmed off all of those so that they were triangles. There we go. That's much better. So then I just continued with my folding. And I folded down all of the edges. Now you can choose what side of the paper that you want your pocket to go on. You might choose the busier side or the plainer side, completely up to you. So now it's time to glue our pockets into our album. So just a little line of glue over the tabs and position it about 1/2 inch from the edges. Choose the picture that you like the best to go with each of your different pages. Bit of glue around the edge and smoothing it down. There we go, and our last little pocket in there like that, and that's all of our pockets in place now. Super easy. Alright, our next step is to use our photographs. These are 4x6 photographs that I've matted onto some pink cardstock, and the cardstock was 4¼ by 6¼ so it just allows the photo to have a pink mat around it. And we'll also have a 3x4 photograph on the opposite page. We will also be using some of the beautiful paper die cuts to decorate our page as well. So just going through and gluing on our photos, our 3x4 photographs and some paper die cuts to decorate our pages. A little 3x4 photograph on this page and a little bit of paper die cuts to decorate. Using the vine paper die cut here. And moving on to our next page, which is a very busy floral page. We have our 3x4 photograph, our cake paper die cut, and our little love heart. And maybe we could put some words on that. We actually add some words to that page a little bit later on. Moving on to our next page here, decorating, gluing that in and adding some paper die cuts to embellish, keeping everything nice and flat. This page here, we've got a 6x4 photograph on the front. I'm going to use some more of these beautiful vines and a flower to decorate. So let's glue all that down. Our photograph, our floral cluster, our vines, our little flower, and our title memories. Alright, so our next step is we're going to add in some of these little 3x4 note cards onto our little photo mats. And these can be an added little card in the album. You know how some people like to have little cards in the album that you can take in and take out? And also you could put a photograph on the back of this little card as well. So potentially it could hold more photographs. Now, for the inside flaps of the album, I decided to change the papers to a lighter paper. I felt that that just matched in a little bit better with the album and just brightened it up a little bit. So I just added a little panel on the top of the paper that was already there. One of the things that bothered me when I was flipping through the album was how all of the little photographs and note cards were sort of on a slant in their pocket. They weren't sort of standing very still and in their correct spot. When I flipped over the pages, you can see how they sort of were moving to the inside of the album. So my solution for this was to use some of the paper die cut love hearts and to glue half of the love heart down onto the page. So I just put glue on half. I slipped it in under the pocket and I glued it there so that the photograph and the little 3x4 picture couldn't slide about in the pocket. It stopped when it hit the love heart and the love heart held it in place. So I went through and added a little heart to each of the pages that had a pocket. And my last step in the album was to use the chalk paint to just paint a line across the top of each of the pockets to create a border and just finish off those pockets beautifully. And that is the completed album. And I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial project. Don't forget that you can download the printable instructions for free on my website at www.papercraftsecrets.com.au. Make sure that you are a subscriber to my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for watching and have a lovely crafty day.